Moi-même, ou relais pour demander cob là. So again? So again? I'm going to avant. Il va alors parler, m'entendre? Il va alors parler? Il va attendre, m'entendre?
IFEOMA's uncles forced her to marry Prince Sonto, who has been under a... IFEOMA's uncles forced her to marry Prince Sonto, who has been under a curse since the day he was born. Her impossible task is to bear a son for the cursed prince who is not in his right senses. How will IFEOMA get out of this mess, or will the prince fall in love with her? Like and follow so you don't miss any part of this story, as I will be dropping it soon. IFEOMA and the Cursed Prince. How it all began before IFEOMA and the Cursed Prince were born. Many years ago, in a beautiful, wealthy kingdom named Ota, the king wanted his only son, Prince Shaba, to marry one of the daughters of the wealthiest men in the kingdom. But Prince Shaba was in love with a poor fisherman's daughter named Ogechi. The king and the queen never supported the prince's love for Ogechi. But when the king fell terribly sick and knew he was about to leave the world of the living, he allowed Prince Shaba to marry Ogechi. He wanted the prince to give him a grandson before he dies. That was how Ogechi married into the royal family. When a new member enters the royal family, he or she is to pick a symbol of color. Ogechi picked purple as her color. She got pregnant 1 month after her marriage to the prince and went into labor 11 months later. 7 of the best midwives gathered in the royal labor room for 2 days. On the 3rd day at midnight, Ogechi gave birth to a set of twins, 2 girls. Prince Shaba was the happiest man when one of the midwives told him that his wife was alive. The queen begged her son to marry another wife, who will give her and the king a grandson, but Prince Shaba refused because of his love for Ogechi. The king died after 2 years of waiting for a grandson. After the king's burial, the queen was officially pronounced the new woman king. Prince Shaba was not crowned king because he did not have a male heir according to their tradition. When the woman king was getting old, she begged her son to give her a grandson, so he could be crowned the new king. But Prince Shaba said no, because he did not want to become like his late father, who married many wives, that still could not give him the male children he was looking for, and only caused trouble in the royal palace. The woman king did not want the throne to be given to any of her daughters because their husbands could easily kill them and overthrow them. So she begged Ogechi to agree and pick a maiden from the qualified young maidens to become Prince Shaba's second wife. Ogechi agreed and convinced her husband to take a second wife. She handpicked 3 maidens instead of 1 maiden as the woman king had asked, because she wanted her husband to have many sons. That was how Prince Shaba married 3 maidens who gave birth to only girls. The woman king requested for the best native doctors and herbal healers to help her son get a male heir. These native doctors and herbal healers bathed more maidens in the sacred river and married them to the prince with promises that they will give the prince many male children. The woman king was disappointed when none of the maidens bore any male children. One day a witch visited the kingdom. She was buying cowries from the local market when she heard 2 maidens gossiping about the royal family. She heard that the woman king was in need of a male heir from the prince. She left the market and went straight to the royal palace. The guards in front of the palace stopped her from entering the palace. She held her staff with both of her hands and disappeared in front of them. It was shocking to the guards and everyone who saw her disappear because the people of Ota do not believe in magic. She reappeared inside the throne room where the woman king was alone with Prince Shaba. "I will give you a male heir if you give me a portion of your kingdom in return," the witch said to the woman king and Prince Shaba, who were surprised to see her. "And if you can't give us what you have promised in the next 9 months, you will be beheaded in the slaughterhouse." Prince Shaba threatened her because he was tired of all the fake promises from people who brag about giving him a male child. The witch placed her staff on the woven floor and bowed down to seal her promise. "I will give you a male heir if you give me a portion of your kingdom in return."
Hey.
The witch repeated her words. She continued to give her instructions while she was still on her knees. "The prince will choose one of his wives that will carry his male heir and plant his seed in her. By tomorrow midnight, she will follow me on a journey to the spiritual realm." The witch finished giving out her instructions and stood up. The woman king and Prince Shaba took a moment to consider the witch's request. They both accepted and offered the witch a house by the seaside. They also agreed to honor their side of the deal. The witch never told them that the mother has to die for the child to be born. Part 2 of IFEOMA and the Curse Prince. Later in the day, Prince Shaba told Ogechi all that the witch had said. Ogechi asked if he could pick her to be the mother of his male heir, and Prince Shaba refused. He did not want his beloved wife to go through any pain if what the witch had promised does not come to pass. Ogechi humbly accepted her husband's rejection and left his presence. Throughout the rest of the day, Prince Shaba could not concentrate, because Ogechi's question kept ringing in his head. He knew that the younger maidens he married only respected Ogechi, because they could not give him any male heir. At night, Ogechi entered the prince's chambers where she always sleeps, and was surprised to see her husband sitting on the bed. She asked him what he was still doing in their room at that time. She did not expect to meet him here when he was supposed to be planting his seed in one of the other wives. He smiled and looked at Ogechi, who was standing in front of him. The prince thought of her happiness if she becomes the mother of his unborn son. "I choose you to be the mother of my unborn son," Prince Shaba said to Ogechi. That night, the prince made passionate love with his first wife, Ogechi. They expressed the love they have for each other over and over again, all through the night. When Ogechi opened her eyes in the morning, she was greeted with her husband's smile. The witch came to the palace at midnight and asked for the chosen wife to come out and hold her staff with both hands. Ogechi came out and held the witch's staff with her hands. The witch placed her both hands on the staff as well, and they both disappeared. 7 days later, the witch and Ogechi appeared in the throne room. The witch proclaimed that Ogechi was carrying the prince's unborn son. The other wives of the prince were envious of Ogechi when they heard that she was carrying a male heir. Throughout Ogechi's pregnancy, the other wives tried to harm her, but they could not succeed. They poisoned her food several times, but nothing happened even after she finished eating the food. The witch was protecting Ogechi with powerful magic. When the time came for Ogechi to go into labor, the witch was there with her in the royal labor room. It was a 7-day-and-night battle for Ogechi, the witch and all the midwives that were present. At the end, Ogechi gave birth to a bouncing baby boy. But something happened. The witch never told them that when a life is given, a life is also taken. Ogechi died the moment she gave birth to her son. One of the midwives ran out to inform Prince Shaba of the birth of his son. Prince Shaba jumped up with excitement when he heard the news. The witch carried the baby boy in her arms and entered the throne room where Prince Shaba and the woman king were waiting. Prince Shaba left the room at once when the witch entered with his son. His instincts told him that something terrible had happened to his Ogechi. He ran to the labor room and found the love of his life lying lifeless on the bed. Her eyes were closed and her once beautiful dark skin was pale. Prince Shaba shouted Ogechi's name and waited for her to respond. He touched her cold hand and hugged her body. He shouted at everyone in the room to get out, and let out a loud cry when he was alone with his dead wife. As he cried in bitterness, his eyes went to the witch's staff that was leaning on the wall. Without thinking of the repercussion, he grabbed the staff and marched to the throne room. The witch was not expecting what happened next. Prince Shaba rose the witch's wooden staff high in the air and smashed it on the wall. The witch's power left her as soon as her staff scattered into pieces. She immediately fell on the ground. Prince Shaba ordered the guards to lock up the witch in the dungeon. The woman king did not interfere. She allowed her son to do whatever he wanted. When the guards were dragging the witch out of the throne room, she opened her mouth and laid a curse on Prince Shaba's son. Ifeoma sneaked into the dungeon without her mother's permission. She wanted to see the witch, who her father said lived behind the huge iron door in the dungeon. Part 3 of Ifeoma and the Curse Prince. Few years after the witch laid a curse on the prince's son, the woman king died, and Prince Shaba was crowned the new king. He adjusted many things in the kingdom, and even allowed male and female servants to get married and have children. A maid and a guard in the royal palace fell in love and had a beautiful daughter together. Everyone who saw their baby thought that she was blind because she had blue eyes. Her parents named her Ifeoma, meaning beautiful one. Ifeoma lived with her parents in the couple's quarters. When Ifeoma was 4 years old, her father was made a guard in the dungeons, while her mother was made a kitchen assistant in the royal kitchen. She was a very popular child in the royal palace. She was also very hardworking and curious to learn about everything. Her parents thought that their little girl's future was certain. They believed that she would grow up to be a royal maid. But everything changed one night when little Ifeoma followed 3 food servers to the dungeon. When the food servers were attending to the guards in the dungeon, she snuck out to search for her father, who was not there with the other guards. She peeped into one prison cage after another. As she continued her search for her father, a huge iron door caught her attention. She took tiny, quiet steps towards the door. "Ifeoma, what are you doing here?" her father asked her. He was standing behind his daughter. "Papa, I was looking everywhere for you." Ifeoma replied with a smile. Her father picked her up and carried her on his shoulders. As they walked away, Ifeoma looked back at the huge iron door. "Papa, what is behind that big door?" she asked her father. Her father did not respond. As days went by, Ifeoma kept asking her father the same question about the huge iron gate. "An evil witch who hates children lives behind that door," her father replied when he was tired of Ifeoma's endless questions. Ifeoma asked her father if she could see the witch, but he refused. One evening when Ifeoma was sitting outside with her mother, she heard other maids saying cruel things about the King Shaba's son, Prince Sonto. "Is the prince wicked?" Ifeoma asked her mother. Her mother told her that a wicked witch made Prince Sonto behave badly to people. From that day, Ifeoma was determined to see Prince Sonto, who was always locked in his room. She would go to the garden very early in the morning to sing the songs her mother told her. She would sing and dance with hopes that the prince would look outside his window and see her. But the prince never looked out his window. This didn't stop Ifeoma from singing and dancing in the garden every morning and evening. When she was 8 years old, her father fell sick. The royal herbalist did everything she could, but Ifeoma's father did not recover. He was slowly dying when Ifeoma sneaked into the dungeon without her mother's permission. She wanted to see the witch, who her father said lived behind the huge iron door in the dungeon. But she managed to peep through the tiny keyhole in the door. She felt pity for the witch who was lying on the cold ground with chains around her neck, wrists, and ankles. Ifeoma was desperate to rescue the witch, so she could heal her father in return. At that age, she had mastered the entire pattern of the dungeon. She climbed a cage to the top and jumped to the other side where the witch was kept. She slowly climbed down the bumpy walls and landed on the ground. The witch did not move. It was as if she could not hear anything. Ifeoma moved closer to the witch, who still hadn't raised her head or moved her neck. All of a sudden, the witch snapped her head backwards. But this did not frighten Ifeoma. It only made her more curious. "I will help you escape from here if you promise to grant me what I desire," Ifeoma boldly told the witch. Ifeoma didn't know that if her father's life is restored, a life is taken in exchange because nothing is free in the magical world. Part 4 of Ifeoma and the Cursed Prince. Ifeoma climbed the wall out of the witch's prison and searched for the keys to the chains. She took all the keys she could find from the key box. She threw the keys into the witch's prison and climbed back in. She tried all the keys, but no one opened any of the locks. Ifeoma was sad about this. What do you want me to do for you, my child? The tired witch asked her. My papa is very sick, and I don't want him to be sick anymore. I want him to play with me like he used to play with me before. And I want my mama to stop crying every night, IFEOMA replied. The witch shook her head. Child, you are still too little to understand this. If your papa's life is restored, the life is taken in exchange. IFEOMA looked at the witch for a moment, as if she was trying to understand what she had just said.
Oh shit.
Does it mean you cannot help my papa? She asked.
Shit.
Go home, my child. Go back home, the witch told her. IFEOMA left the dungeon with tears in her eyes. Some days later, Papa IFEOMA joined his ancestors. Mama IFEOMA's brother-in-laws troubled and blamed her for the death of their brother. It was a tragic period for the woman. Her in-laws took her to many places to swear oaths. This torment caused Mama IFEOMA to have stroke. King Shaba was kind enough to pay for all Mama IFEOMA's treatment, and he also gave them a small house to live in. The house was not very far from the palace. When IFEOMA turned 14 years old, she started working as a maid to take care of her mother, since she couldn't afford to sit down and only rely on the king's help. The thought of the king changing his mind at any time and withdrawing his assistance made her restless. At first, her duty was to sweep the royal courtyard in the morning and at night. IFEOMA did this for 3 years before she was promoted to washing the royal family's dirty clothes. She would wake up very early in the morning and cook food for herself and her mother before leaving for the palace. At least their neighbors could hear Mama IFEOMA anytime she shouted for help, and they also check up on her every time. One day when IFEOMA was walking past the garden by the prince's window, where she used to dance and sing when she was little, she heard someone humming one of her songs. She listened and tried to trace where the sound was coming from. She was shocked to find out that it was coming from the prince's opened window. After waiting for a while, the humming stopped, and a senior guard shut the window. From then on, IFEOMA continued to sing and dance in the garden. Even on days when her schedule was tight, she would still find time to sing and dance in the garden underneath the prince's window every day and night, because she believed that it was the prince that was humming her song the other day. 1 year later, when IFEOMA was 18 years old, King Shaba called for all the well-behaved maids in the palace, and she was among the few maids that were picked. She was the only young maid among them, since all the other maids were old women. They were screened one after the other and tested on their abilities in keeping secrets. Prince Sonto used all the princesses his father married to him as punching bags. Part 5 of IFEOMA and the Cursed Prince. IFEOMA and the other few women who passed the screening were assigned a duty that was to be kept secret, because the king didn't want the entire kingdom to know about his son's irrational behavior. I have arranged for my son to marry a princess from the neighboring kingdom, King Shaba announced. I want you all to be at his beck and call. However, whatever the prince says or does is to be kept within this walls. He gave his last instructions and sent them away. IFEOMA's job was to clean Prince Sonto's room and attend to his needs. The first time she laid eyes on the prince was a tragic moment for her. Prince Sonto was very aggressive and abusive. He threw tantrums for no reason and acted like a little child when things do not go his way. Palace guards always had to accompany anyone who wanted to enter Prince Sonto's room in order to prevent him from attacking the person without warning. The wedding ceremony King Shaba arranged between his son Prince Sonto and the princess from the neighboring kingdom turned out to be a great success. Prince Sonto was in his best behavior because his father had promised to give him anything he wanted. The representatives from the other kingdom were showered with bountiful gifts. Gold and diamonds filled many pots as a token of appreciation from King Shaba to the princess's family. After the ceremony was over, the princess was escorted to the prince's chamber, where she is to be deflowered by the prince. 2 weeks later, the princess cried out to the king that Prince Sonto hasn't touched her or said anything to her since the day of their wedding. When Prince Sonto heard what the princess said to his father, it angered him so much. He waited for the princess to return to his room before he reigned, beating on her. By the time the palace guards could drag the princess out of the room, she was almost lifeless. IFEOMA watched all these things that happened in front of her. She kept it to herself since it was forbidden for her to speak of it to anyone. Every night when she went home and her mother asked her about the palace, she would lie and say all was well. Mama IFEOMA was recovering gradually, and this made IFEOMA very excited. Meanwhile, the princess returned to her people, and another wedding between Prince Sonto and a princess from a faraway kingdom was planned. This new marriage didn't last long. The princess from the faraway kingdom ran to the king's quarters one night after Prince Sonto nearly pushed her from the balcony because she touched his bare back when he was taking off his robe. After many more efforts and trials from King Shaba to make his son settle down and give him a grandchild, the king put a stop to all the marriage arrangements before his son would kill another man's daughter. When King Shaba was in his son's room, he noticed how his son's face lit up when a singing voice came out of the garden. For the first time, he saw his son Prince Sonto, beaming and humming to the song with a relaxed expression. King Shaba wondered if he had found the solution to his problems. He looked through his son's window and saw IFEOMA singing and dancing in the garden. "Sonto," the king called. "Look at how beautiful this maid is. Don't you think she would make a good wife?" The king looked back at his son, who was still humming the wonderful melody. Prince Sonto had never looked out his window in search of the owner of the melodious voice that calms him down every time. When King Shaba left his son's room, he ordered for IFEOMA to be brought to his quarters. IFEOMA was at home with her mother when several palace guards arrived at their home to inform her of the king's order. IFEOMA is caught stealing from the king. Part 6 of IFEOMA and the Cursed Prince. Mama IFEOMA didn't like the idea of her daughter going to see the king. She asked IFEOMA countless times if she had offended the king. When IFEOMA entered the king's quarters, the first thing that caught her attention as she stood by the door to the king's bedroom was a bunch of keys dangling by the king's bedstands. Could they be the keys to the witch's chains? IFEOMA voiced out her thoughts without noticing the presence of the king behind her. "So you are the beautiful maid whose voice calms my son's anger." King Shaba's voice thundered as he entered his quarters. IFEOMA bowed her head in respect for the king. King Shaba strolled into his room and sat on his armchair. "Come and join me." He beckoned IFEOMA and offered her a chair opposite him. "How would you like to be my daughter-in-law?" IFEOMA choked on her own saliva as she heard the king's question. "My king, I don't mean any disrespect, but Prince Sonto is not a man I can marry." IFEOMA humbly spoke the obvious truth. "You are different from all the other maidens, my child." King Shaba tried to persuade her, but IFEOMA turned a deaf ear. The king's final words were for IFEOMA to reconsider his proposal, as it still stands. When IFEOMA got home, she narrated all that happened in the king's quarters to her mother. Her mother didn't like the idea of her daughter getting close to the prince. "Even though the king has been very merciful to us, the undeniable truth is that his son is a madman," Mama IFEOMA murmured. Mama, IFEOMA shifted. Did I lie? Mama IFEOMA's face got more serious. I don't want you anywhere near him. Haven't you heard the rumors going around about how he almost killed the princess from another kingdom? Mama IFEOMA asked her daughter. What bothers you about his son? The only thing IFEOMA was thinking about were the keys in the king's bedstand.
Moi gon spray. Avant m'aller faire chose pour me faire acheter spray ça Simone. Ou connaît comme ça que figure nous connaît depuis qu'il a la figure. Depuis avec 10 heures du matin. Pour les casser. Pour me dire c'est à la de tirer. Est-ce que même quand tu dans la figure ça? On fait couper avec ma loupe non. Alexandre avait des diplômes non mais c'est tout le monde devenu normal mais
one of her uncles said it. IFEOMA and her mother heard people shouting from outside. Mama IFEOMA went outside to greet the familiar crowd. IFEOMA followed behind. They threatened to make Mama IFEOMA's life miserable if her daughter doesn't accept the king's offer to marry the prince. The same uncles who tormented her mother until she fell sick and also abandoned her to their fate.
Toi, l'idée, là.
Diamonds they would receive from the king if the union between their niece and Prince Sonta was successful.
Merci, mes amours, merci.
Claire was filled with bitterness for her selfish uncle. My husband. I would also want to be in love with the royal family.
On a les gars, tapez quand vous tiflez. Voyez quand t'as fois vite comme ça. Tapez quand vous tiflez, bébé, tapez quand vous tiflez.
Her mother would make her do the right thing.
Paris.
When they were out of hearing, Mama IFEOMA dragged her daughter
Oui,
inside
ça on m'a dit
her
là, mais on m'a dit bagaille, oui.
whispered, "We will
Guys,
take
on a les
all
gars,
the
je ne
necessary
fais pas, je ne fais pas,
things
je ne
we
fais
need
pas, oui.
and leave this kingdom
Gars, je ne
to
fais
you."
pas, pas comprendre ça fini là, non?
And no
Gars, je ne
one
fais pas,
is to
bébé,
know
je ne fais pas,
about
qui
what
s'en finit
they
comme
are
ça.
about to
On
do.
a les bébés, je ne fais pas, je ne fais pas, allez, 30 secondes. Oui, il finit comme ça, on a fait faire. Gars, je ne fais pas, bon, je merci. Gars, faut dire pas en pile, bébé, faut dire pas en pile, faut dire pas en pile, faut dire pas en pile, guys.
She arranged things in a very subtle way to avoid visitors or neighbors from suspecting anything.
Hey!
With all this going on in her life, IFEOMA was still thinking about how she would get the keys that were in the king's bedroom.
Cette gueule
When she was serving the prince his lunch, King Shaba walked in on him. Could you excuse us for a moment? The king looked at IFEOMA in a very humble manner. Yes, my king. She bowed and left. When she was out of the prince's bedroom and in sight of the king's quarters, something came to her mind.
Okay.
IFEOMA thought that the king's conversation with his son would take a long time, so she sneaked into the king's quarters under the pretext of running an errand for him. The guards believed her because she was now a popular maid who was rumored to be the king's future daughter-in-law. After much effort, she was able to grab the keys. What are you doing in here? King Shaba questioned IFEOMA, who turned quickly to see the king and his guards in the bedroom. IFEOMA collided against Prince Santo's bare chest, and they both felt a spark. Part 7 of IFEOMA and the Cursed Prince. Fully armored guards were standing behind King Shaba and were awaiting the king's order to mishandle IFEOMA where she stood. IFEOMA stammered shyly before revealing the golden ring she had slipped into her pocket. Where did you find it? King Shaba asked, his voice breaking as he grasped the small, delicate golden ring with tiny black diamond stones around the star-shaped diamond gemstone. The ring belonged to his late wife, Ogechi. IFEOMA had found it underneath the prince's bedstand when she was cleaning, and had used it as her alibi in case she got caught. King Shaba smiled as he continued to look at the ring in his hand, remembering all the memories he shared with the love of his life. He excused the guard and IFEOMA from his room. As IFEOMA was walking down the hallway, she kept glancing back to check if she was being followed. She didn't see the prince in front of her. Sorry, my prince. She fell to the ground to get the stolen keys that had dropped down from underneath her dress. as she collided against Prince Santo's masculine chest. She got back on her feet and looked up at him. Prince Santo froze on the spot. It was the closest he and Ifeoma had ever been. And the first time he had noticed the color of her eyes. I am sorry, my prince, Ifeoma said, and walked away in a hurry because she was not comfortable with the way he stared down at her, like he could see through her. Ifeoma left the palace and went straight to the dungeon to see the old witch. It was more difficult for her to navigate the dungeon since she had grown and couldn't pass through tiny spaces. Her only hope was that the guards were no longer as alert as before. She opened the gate and unlocked the witch's chamber. The weak old witch was surprised to see Ifeoma, who she recognized because of her blue eyes. She slipped the witch through the tunnels in the dungeon and hid her in an abandoned farmhouse. She ran to the farm nearby and plucked some fresh mangoes for the witch. I will come back for you when the sun comes down. Ifeoma told the witch and also gave her the water she fetched. When she went back to the palace, she was shocked to see all her paternal uncles sitting and discussing with King Shaba. They had accepted the king's proposal on behalf of Ifeoma and were willing to give her up for gold and diamonds. She bared the pain in her heart and continued her duties until the gong bell rang out.
Keep going.
The witch has escaped. One of the guards in the
Stop
dungeon
it, God!
ran to the palace and announced in a
Wala hindi,
trembling
look.
voice. She didn't expect the guards to notice the witch's disappearance so soon. 3 things were left for her to do before the king ordered for all the passageway out of the kingdom to be blocked. She has to return the keys without being spotted. She has to sneak the witch out of the kingdom. And she has to meet with her mother so they could leave the kingdom. With all the commotions in the palace, Ifeoma tried to use the opportunity to hurry into the king's quarters, but she was stopped. No one was to enter into the king's quarters without his direct permission. Not knowing what next to do, Ifeoma ran to her mother and explained everything she had done. Her mother was disappointed. Ifeoma, it is your decision. You have to choose between leaving this kingdom or helping the witch. Mama Ifeoma told her daughter, I don't want the gods to find the witch. Ifeoma said. Mama Ifeoma took the trap shade reins and followed her daughter to the abandoned farmhouse where the witch was hiding. They had the witch inside the trap and were about to cover her up properly before she spoke. Ask me of anything you want, my child, and I will do it for you, without anything in return. Ifeoma wanted to speak before a god saw them from afar. Mama Ifeoma quickly covered the witch and told the guard to help her to push the trap. Before the guard came close, Mama Ifeoma urged her daughter to go to the king and accept his proposal. This is the only way for you to return the keys before he notices. Mama Ifeoma knew that the gods wouldn't let her daughter leave the kingdom since her uncles had given her up to marry the prince. Ifeoma shouted at Prince Santo that she would rather sleep on the floor than sleep on the same bed with him. Heartache of Ifeoma and the cursed prince. Ifeoma was restless when she got back to the palace. There was heavy commotion in the palace and guards running around everywhere. The royal family members were all afraid that the witch would attack them. As Ifeoma was clearing up the table after Prince Santo's dinner, she heard her name on the prince's lips for the first time. Ifeoma. She called her name as if she was confused. Is your name Ifeoma? She turned to Prince. Yes, my prince. And you want to marry me? He asked. Ifeoma stood still, not knowing what to say to her. What do you want? He asked her. Jewelry, clothes, a princess title, or a means to steal from my father? Prince Santo studied her reactions closely. Ifeoma was stunned by the prince's question. I will help you if you agree to abide by my rules, Prince Santo said. I know you have something to do with the escape of the witch in the dungeon. I saw the keys when you dropped them today. And I know you are distressed because you haven't returned them. IFEOMA could not say a word. Give me the keys. I will return them for you. But I want your full cooperation to all my instructions. He decided to trust him and handed over the keys to him. Prince Santo collected the keys and left his room. When he entered his father's room, he lied to the king that the keys were with him, and that the witch might have used magic to free herself. In order to distract his father, he included that he liked the idea of marrying the beautiful man. King Shaba was ecstatic to hear what his son had said. Preparations should be in order then. He shouted, "My son is getting married." Prince Santo returned to his bedroom where IFEOMA was waiting patiently and listening what he wanted from her. When we get married, I do not want you anywhere near my things. He started, but IFEOMA cut him off. Before you continue talking, my prince, I do not want this union as much as you do not want it. This marriage is only going to happen because my uncles have all agreed on it. They want your father's throne, and I want peace of mind. IFEOMA stared straight at Prince Santo, who tried to speak again. He cleared his throat and stared back at her. Don't even think of treating me like you treated those other princesses you were married to. And for your information, I will love to sleep on the floor every night instead of sleeping by your side. IFEOMA finished and stormed out of the prince's bedroom. It was like Prince Santo had finally seen someone who matched his same energy and wouldn't take his nonsense. When IFEOMA got home, her mother had not yet come back. She sat and thought about what transpired between the prince and her. She wondered where her courage came from, and why she spoke to the prince in that manner. Well, maybe if I continue to act tough around him, he will treat me with some regard. Mama IFEOMA came back home the next morning and told her daughter that the witch was safe. IFEOMA's mother kept the witch in a small house in a small village not too far from Ota. It was Mama IFEOMA's late grandmother's house. She volunteered to visit the witch every market day. When IFEOMA told her mother about her conversation with the prince, her mother was satisfied. If your passion is too much, my daughter, all you have to do is pack your way and come back home. Marriage is not a death sentence. How can a grown-up man still be a virgin? Part 9 of IFEOMA and the Cursed Prince. The days went so fast. King Shaba's representative had gone with Prince Santo to meet with IFEOMA's people and officially asked for her hand in marriage. Everything had gone smoothly, and the date of their wedding was set. Prince Santo paced around his room on the morning of his wedding. There was a feeling of doubt in the air for him. He was used to not feeling any emotions during his weddings. But today was a different day. His palms were sweaty, and his heart was uneven. Each time he looked through his window and saw the wedding decorations, he felt faint and nervous. However, IFEOMA was being groomed by maidens her age. You are going to be a princess, one of the maidens said. IFEOMA was beautifully dressed in a stunning white gown, in accordance with their tradition. Her blue eyes were the envy of many. Mama IFEOMA cried when she saw how beautiful and innocent her daughter looked. She excused everyone and faced her daughter. IFEOMA, 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 how many times did I call you? 3 times, Mama. Did you see your late father hit me when he was alive? Mama IFEOMA asked. No, Mama. IFEOMA, if the prince hits you, Biko, pack your load and come back home. Because if I
20
lose you,
20 fleurs, 20 mon 20
IFEOMA, that means I have lost
20 mon 20
everything.
fleurs, guys. 20 mon 20 fleurs, il va perdre encore. Ouais, ça
IFEOMA.
c'est 20 mon 20 fleurs, guys.
The
20 mon
word
20
is
fleurs,
enough
20
for the
mon 20
wise.
fleurs. 20 mon 20 fleurs
Mama
chaque, guys. Chaque mon
IFEOMA
20 fleurs, nous pas
concluded
besoin
and
de
hugged
ça.
her daughter so tightly. IFEOMA and her
Éducation,
people
par
were
contre,
escorted to the royal palace
par contre,
where the
côté
wedding
mon
was to
ici,
take place.
par contre, ici.
Pleasantries were
Guys, on
exchanged
joue dans
and
Fouadia, guys,
votes
on
were
joue dans
done.
Fouadia, guys. Depuis nous quand on monte dans
The
Fouadia, nous monte là-dessus,
celebration
on
was
pas fait
in
encore
full
faire.
swing with
Guys, on
many
fait Fouadia, tout le monde, on
entertainers
fait
doing
Fouadia, guys,
one
on joue dans
trick or
Fouadia,
the
bébé,
other.
on joue dans Fouadia.
And
Nickel,
so
social,
many fun activities
les
here
social.
and there.
Guys, joue dans Fouadia, tout le monde,
When
depuis
it was
qu'on y a
time,
monté dans
IFEOMA
Fouadia, guys,
uncle
depuis nous monte
poured
dans Fouadia, nous
palm
pas
wine
imiter
into a
l'autre
cup
monde,
and instructed her to give it
guys,
to
on
the
joue dans
man she
Fouadia
wanted to
ensemble,
marry.
bébé, yo!
Everywhere went quiet as IFEOMA danced around with the cup of palm wine in her hand.
Côté,
All the
côté
men
même mon petit
present
galaxie
at
pour
the
nous voir, bon,
occasion
les
were
bloqués,
scared
tout.
to say
Là,
a
on va
word.
voir, les.
Even though IFEOMA wasn't happy with the whole
Mais pour une
arrangement,
grande punition, quand on
she
on monte
couldn't
tomber sur
resist dancing
6-7 punitions, mais elle monte.
to one
Guys, on
of
joue
her
dans Fouadia,
favorite
bébé, mais on
songs
joue
that
dans
was
Fouadia,
sung.
guys. C'est Fouadia qui a monté nous, tout le monde. On
She
joue dans
knelt down
Fouadia,
in front
bébé,
of
mais on
Prince
joue là.
Sonto and handed him the cup of palm wine, which he drank, and kept a gold bar inside the empty cup for IFEOMA to give to her uncles.
Merci, merci, guys, merci.
King Shaba was the happiest
Merci, bébé, mio,
he
merci.
had
On va
ever been.
entrer dans Fouadia, yo. Si on est
He
entrer
spoke in
dans
a
Fouadia,
loud
nous t'a
voice to
monté
his
plus,
guests.
plus. Merci, chérie, mio,
If
merci.
my
Merci.
beautiful daughter-in-law can give me a grandson
couille, nous,
within
là.
2 years, I will erect a golden
C'est qu'on
statue
soit au
of
point,
her
au point,
late
bénédiction,
father.
oui.
To IFEOMA's uncles, the king's words meant
Merci,
more
bébé,
money
mio,
to
merci,
them.
merci, merci. Guys, on a les
After
gars,
the
n'a tapé n'a
occasion
joué,
was
guys, n'a
over,
tapé n'a joué.
IFEOMA's
Guys,
people
nous
were
pas manquer,
showered
nous
with
pas
so
envoyer
many
Galaxy
gifts.
Jeans, voyons un pistolet, guys. Chaque monde un
Mama
pistolet, tout le monde,
IFEOMA
chaque
was
monde un
given a
pistolet,
fully
guys. On
furnished
monte à
house
belle, guys.
with
Galaxy,
entire
t'es qu'à monter
floors
nous
where
avec
she would
6 pètes, nous
continue
pas
to
voulu
stay,
voir, tout le monde. Non, non,
and
t'es depuis
several
qu'on y a,
maids
guys.
to attend to
Jean,
her
moi,
needs.
là. C'est pas moi de prendre
As
ça, qu'à
IFEOMA
prendre.
was being
Et ça va pas
escorted to
prendre.
Prince Sonto's bedroom, her uncles met up with them and took her to an empty room, pretending to give her parting advice.
No! Pas jouer non gant!
If you don't give the king a grandson in the next 11
Pas
months,
jouer là-dedans. Pas jouer
the
dans gang.
wicked one whispered to her,
Pas jouer dans gang.
we will kill
Pas
your
jouer dans gang. Mon
mother
sac
and
la
watch
gueule, guys,
you
pour le faire.
bury
Quoi
her.
ça, la gueule, lui?
IFEOMA
Pas
was
jouer dans
scared
gang.
because she
Quoi
knew
ça,
how
la gueule,
horrible
lui?
her uncles were.
Pas jouer là-dedans, Simone.
The
S'il
leader
te
of
plaît,
the
pas jouer là-dedans,
nobles
pas jouer
had
là-dedans,
to
pas jouer
hold
là-dedans, pas
IFEOMA's
jouer là-dedans.
hand.
Même mon fleur pour ne pas jouer là-dedans, pas jouer là-dedans, guys, pas jouer là-dedans, pas jouer, pas jouer.
As
Pas
IFEOMA was
jouer.
walking
She
with the
love
crowd
that.
of maidens, she felt a wave of
Desi pas jouer
pity
là-dedans,
for
il
the
pas entrer,
ones
non?
who set
Il pas,
their
Desi
wish
pas
to
jouer,
the
guys,
man
pas
for the
jouer. What the hell?
At night, Prince Sonto lay down on his bed, but he couldn't sleep. He kept glancing down at IFEOMA, who was sleeping peacefully on the blanket she
Ouais,
spread
je
over
regarde
her.
yo.
For the
Ouais,
first
ouais.
time in his life, he felt silly because he let her sleep on the floor
Si.
on her wedding night.
Ouais, on a les gars, ça nous gagne snipe, ça nous gagne snipe, guys, ça nous gagne snipe, ça nous gagne snipe. Guys, ça nous gagne snipe, appelle, guys, ça nous gagne snipe, appelle. Qu'est-ce qu'il a, gars? Bon, parle avec ça. T'as les petits monde. Ça là!
Lying on
J'allais
his
te dire,
conscience
jouer pour
in the
oui?
bathtub.
Yo joue pour moi au Galaxy, yo pour moi, yo joue pour moi.
Sonto covered IFEOMA with a
E sa
bath.
moun yo di, yo jwe pou. E mwen bon kote mwen gran santi. E mwen bon kote mwen gran santi, chéri. Mwen santi bon kote mwen yo pa la gen.
Mais quand on met cette machine, moi, là, qui grandit, mais pas où?
Something that
Mwen pa gen mwen se ti machin bon kote mwen bébé.
Bon, attendez, son petit machine, on met ses montages. Mon bagage, couleur, mais c'est quand on la clague.
Non, non, e pa kote mwen chéri. E pa kote
was
mwen.
completely
Qui est-ce
lost
qui était ça côté de nana?
and dumbfounded.
Quel monde qui va appeler, ouais?
Under the sheets.
Eh bien, on te dans le téléphone, non, manger.
IFEOMA.
Pour qui ça
This
fait
was
ça?
the first time Prince Sonto had ever laid so close to anyone.
Ouais, j'ai mon méchant. Ça veut dire, moi, pour me bénéficier, hein? Eh bien, moi, laissez-moi me bénéficier, hein? Ouais, j'ai mon méchant. Qui est-ce qui fait ça?
Non, gan pa soti kote mwen même.
Garde ça, Shindy. Shindy, on peut dire qu'on s'en devine faire là. Shindy, elle a envie,